Welcome to Our Alternative, the podcast bringing you what started as heated family discussions on the couch and evolved into a vision for a better future for us all. As form concepts fell to pieces on the 7th of October, and as one of the reasons for the attack was the misconception that we were crumbling from within, we all agree a change is needed. We have to find an alternative. Hi, Abba.
Shavua Tov, Yael.
After 75 years, something is still not working. On the 6th of October, we were closer than ever to civil war. Ayalon was blocked weekly. We are a nation that doesn't trust in its government and a government that doesn't trust in its justice system. And then, on that terrible Shabbat, an attack that left a portion of Israel exposed. So they ask us now to wait till after the war, to send the best of our sons and husbands to defend. But how do we know it's not just going to be another round? And if everything that we thought was supposed to work hasn't worked, and we think that this is not the right way, what is the alternative? What else can we do?
Well, as you know, I give shiurim and lectures primarily on Shabbos, but not just on this subject around the country and here in Ifrat. And I've been talking about this subject, our alternative, since the beginning of the war, since that difficult Shabbat some 4 months ago. And together with our friends here, we've developed a line of thinking, which together we can really say it's our alternative. When I mean our alternative, I mean no longer that of the establishment that ruled the country somehow until the 6th, 7th of October 4 months ago, and then betrayed the trust of the Jewish people. And if it wasn't for the heroic efforts of individuals and the not high-ranking officers, we would have been in a much worse situation than we are today. But the fact is that not just you and me, and nearly everybody we talk to feel as though we haven't got a solution. The fact is, I believe our leaders, both our military leaders and our political ones, simply don't know what to do. And I think it's telling, because I think we're now undergoing a transformation, a shift amongst the Israeli elites. From we had the first 50 years, we had the Ma'arach leading until 77, from when they set up the Histadrut. The last 50 years, the Likud left, and we're going towards some sort of new leadership, and it's going to be a process. But for that leadership to emerge, it has to have an alternative. It has to have answers which are really relevant, which seem to work and make sense. So when you say to me, what's our alternative? You're actually asking, how can we produce a new elite, a new leadership, which will have different, better answers for the Israeli state, for the Jewish people, to solve the mess we find ourselves in the last year, year and a half. And it's not just the last 4 months. It's been the last year and a bit that we found ourselves increasingly without solutions. Civil society seemed to have broken down, and now our trust, our faith in the military establishment and in our political leaders is at an all-time low. So what are we supposed to do? As everybody says, ma alternativa shelachem? What's our alternative? I want to give you, over the next discussions we have, I want to lay out for you the principles of how our alternative should look. So it's not just a question of our alternative, it's a different vision. It's a different way of seeing where we are, which leads to an answer of where we should go as well. So we need to understand where we are, and we need to understand how to get out, how to get Israel moving again, because both issues, the civil problem and now the military or international political one, is sipur echad, just like Yosef and Paro. Shnei chalomot, here two nightmares. They have an underlying chord and theme. And over the next few discussions, I'll show you what the underlying problem has been, and much more importantly, what our solutions to both of these really difficult challenges could and should be.
So we're here to try and create a vision, to try and create an alternative. But What's been so wrong about what we've been doing till today?
Good question. I think an easy place to start is the fact that there seems to be something wrong with the Zionist dream. And I'll tell you what I think that something is, but in relation to the second challenge, that of Gaza, and now what to do with all the Arabs we suddenly find ourselves in charge of. Let me explain what I mean. Since the beginning of the state 75 years ago, you know what? Since the beginning of Herzl's prophetic vision, dream that we, the Jewish people, need a state, and his efforts to get one for us, there's been something fundamentally amiss with the Zionist idea. And that is what we've really wanted is a safe and secure haven for ourselves, somewhere quiet, somewhere where the Goyim would leave us alone, where they won't spend morning, noon, and night trying to kill us, somewhere we could live normally. Ish tachat gafno, and we were prepared to consider Uganda. We realized it has to be Eretz Yisrael. But when we got here, we didn't want to understand and realize that there are other people here and we have to deal with their problems. We have our own sorrows. We wanted to have a safe and secure existence. We wanted a Medinat Mamad, a safe room where we could close the doors, lock the windows, put on the transmitter radio, and pretend there's nothing else out there. And we try every possible way to make sure that happens. We tried, whenever we won, strategic retreats, negotiated settlements, non-negotiated settlements, strategic abandonment of Jewish settlements. We destroyed Jewish settlements with our own hands. We just wanted one thing, for the Goyim, for the Arabs around us to leave us alone. Let them lead their own lives and we'll lead our lives. And I'm not getting into the question of anybody who deserves a state. All those are political issues broader than what we're going to be talking about. We just didn't want to deal with them. We want to worry about ourselves. It's hard enough. We don't want to worry about the Goyim, about the Arabs around us. And for 70 years, 5 years, we've tried really, really hard, and it hasn't worked. And I think the culmination of it not working was what happened on Shmini Atzeret, when we realized that Arabs who we literally had built fences, technological barriers, which we'd abandoned and destroyed Jewish settlements just to get the hell out of there, which we'd left behind, invaded and massacred and killed and raped Jews just because we were Jews. They don't leave us alone. So maybe I put to you, maybe we got this wrong. Maybe what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants for us is not to have a safe and secure haven, not to have a Medinat Mamad or Medinat Miklat for the Jewish people. You know, he's promised us for the last 3,330 something years that he will ensure our survival. And so far, he's ensured our survival. Nobody else has survived, we have. So survival seems secured. It's going beyond survival. Right. It's becoming a blessing to the nations of the area, which is our challenge. So coming back here, we have to come back and realize that we live amongst peoples, not just the immediate neighbors, but also the countries around us, all of whom are in a terrible state, and ask ourselves, how does HaKadosh Baruch Hu want us to be a Medinat Bracha? How are we supposed to be not only the people in charge of Eretz Israel, but also a source of blessing for others in our midst and around us in Eretz Israel? How the hell are we supposed to do that? That's a much bigger challenge. That's a challenge that Zionism has always tried to avoid, in fact, to evade. And it keeps chasing us. And I think we can't evade it any further. I think we can't avoid it any further. So what I really want to be discussing with you over our next few talks is not only what we do in Azan, how we resolve the war there and how we finish it quickly and win and do what we have to do, but more importantly, how we learn to be Moshlei Haaretz, how we learn to rule here justly and correctly in a way which the Jewish people should rule, bringing ultimately a blessing to all the peoples, even the wretches in Gaza, the moral wretches in Gaza, even to them. How do we become a Medinat Bracha, not just to ourselves, but primarily to Goyei Haaretz? And all that, Ayelet, is without beginning to discuss how we resolve the no less complex problem of our internal divisions, which at this moment, the vector is pointed towards threatening literally splitting of the Jewish people, and reverting to our usual practices, our normative practice of an internal Jewish civil war. But for the first few discussions, we're going to talk about Uzzah, and we're going to talk about how we become just rulers of this land. And so to start, and again, to finish off the first conversation this evening, let me just tell you two brief principles which will guide us when we go into the details, I think, next conversation about actually what our war aims should be. Two principles which are so different than what you hear from our military and primarily our political establishment today. New principles, a basis of Jewish morality, international morality, something which the Jewish people haven't dealt with since maybe the time of King Shlomo and David, possibly for a short, brief time amongst the Hashmonaim period, and we made a mess of it there as well. Since King David's period, we haven't had a chance to develop an international Jewish morality. That starts now. Because if we don't develop a new, unique voice, we'll be letting down not just ourselves, I believe we'll be letting down the world as well. And let me explain that to you. You know, HaKadosh Baruch Hu puts us here not just to look after us, as I said. He puts us here because I believe God cares not just about the Jewish people. He cares equally about all people, all human beings created as they are in God's image. And they all have problems. So that God says to all mankind, don't worry, I have a special people. They are, by dint of their historical experience and their wisdom, maybe their knowledge, able to help resolve your problem, the world's problems as well. And how does he do that? He puts the world's difficulties, their problems, their challenges squarely in our face. So we can't avoid them. So we can't say, well, it's not our issue. It is our issue. And think what issue at the moment takes up most of the headlines. Think what issue is threatening to bring down, change governments throughout the Western world. Immigration. How
Immigrants.
others, how you rule people who don't think you like yourself, who don't look like you, and who believe differently than you do. Do you let them in? And once they're in, how do you rule them justly? And Western governments don't know what to do. What they call Judeo-Christian morality, which is primarily post-Christian morality, has failed them totally. They've mixed up human rights together with citizenship issues, and they have no way of resolving the issues. So I believe God gives us the issue fairly and squarely in our face and says, you solve it. And solve it not just for yourself. World's waiting for us to be a blessing. So how do we go about doing that? How do we go about creating a unique Jewish voice, dealing with this urgent, compellingly urgent issue of immigration, international migration, of people who don't believe the things that you believe in, who suddenly you find within your borders? What do you do with them? And I'm going to start off and finish our conversation this evening with two first principles, which again are so different. They're 179 degrees from what you hear from our existing military and political establishment. Number one, from now on, we need to tell the world, we should have done it before we went into Uzzah, but it's not too late to tell them now. Whatever we conquer, whatever we take by spilling, sadly, Jewish blood, remains ours forever. There are no more retreats. There are no more discussions. There are no more negotiations. If we have to fight to conquer land, it's ours by dint of kibush, by dint of conquest, by dint of us spilling our blood to take that land. But B, the more important corollary is, from now on, everything we take is our responsibility. And responsibility does not mean merely or only military control. That is next to nonsense. Military control inevitably always leads to leaving. It's just a matter of how long before you leave. A week, a month, a year, 5 years. But eventually you go, and it also inevitably worse people come in your place. A vacuum is created. Think about the Hezbollah. They were tiny when we left, when we ran away in 2000, thanks to Ehud Barak, when we abandoned South Lebanon. And now 30, 40, 50,000 trained commandos with 200,000 rockets. Military control is something on a timer, is something temporary. And when it ends, and it always costs blood, when it ends, you end up worse than when you started. So when I say we take land, I say we take responsibility, which must be primarily civic. We have to take upon ourselves full civilian responsibility for the people we conquer. Let me elaborate a little bit on that last point, and believe me, we'll speak about it at great detail in our further conversations. There is a saying, Chazal say, Adam kana latzmo eved, kana latzmo adon. If you take upon yourself, if you find yourself adopting, buying another human being, when that such thing was sadly norm in the world, when you find yourself responsible for another human being, you have taken upon yourself a new master. It's what Chazal and the Torah expect from us. Conquering land is relatively the easy part. Taking responsibility for the people and learning how to rule them justly, that's our challenge today. And we need to turn around to the world and say, not only have we conquered, but we're responsible. Not the Egyptians, not the Turks or the Qataris or UNRWA or wicked people or anybody else of that mix. We're responsible, fully responsible. And what that responsibility means and how we go about doing it is something I want to explain to you more as we go through these discussions together. So remember the two principles. Whatever we conquer, we tell them up front. If tomorrow morning, chas v'shalom, we have to go into South Lebanon or to South Syria, if we take it and it costs us blood, there ain't no negotiation. It's ours. But ours means that we have a huge new responsibility to rule the people we find there, wretches that they may be, justly and in a way which HaKadosh Baruch Hu would be proud of us. Thanks, Yael. Good night. Love. Bye.
Good night, Abba.